My name is Tanya McGinnis. I'm the director of SAC. I'd like to thank you for joining us for the second webinar in the Advanced Education series. Tonight, our presenter, Kevin Kiley, who's with Grad School Roadmap, is going to discuss a very important part of the admissions process, the application essay and personal statement. So without further ado, I am going to hand the session over to Kevin, and we'll get started. So thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tanya, and thank you all for joining me this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's a great pleasure to again be presenting as part of the SAC Advanced Education Webinar series. This is a wonderful endeavor that Tanya and all the people affiliated with SAC are putting on, and I hope that you all are able to take full advantage of all the different resources here. And so thank you, and I hope you were able to join us last Wednesday when we talked about application components and what admissions committees are specifically looking for. That webinar rather is available on the SAC website, the recording of it. I hope you see those, and the micro webinars that we had there as well, going over all different kinds of different things that are related to grad school applications in the admissions process. And I hope you find them all to be very valuable. Tonight, going a little further into one of the things that we kind of touched on in the previous live webinar, and that is talking about application essays. We're going to take a deep dive into these because this is an extremely important component of just about every grad school application, and can quite literally make or break your candidacy. So definitely worth its own live webinar, which is what we're going to be doing here this evening. Once again, this is a part of a broader webinar series. It's every Wednesday leading up to the full admissions fair on the 6th of October. We actually have one of these live webinars just before that admissions fair that will start at 7 p.m. Eastern on October the 6th. A live admissions fair, a virtual admissions fair with actual programs in schools, and get a chance to use some of this new knowledge I hope that you're gained through these webinars, and then you're off and running as you continue to consider pursuing graduate studies. So more information on the SAC website, of course, on each of these. A little bit of background about me. I was the admissions director at Washington University in St. Louis. And when I was there, I had that role for about 5.5 years. I led up the recruiting of our junior military officers. And due to that, and due to a lot of other professional experiences that I've had, I've reviewed literally thousands of graduate applications. I've also worked in corporate talent development, and now I use that experience that I received, that I earned at both WashU and in corporate talent development to do two things. One is to coach people around the graduate school admissions process and do application coaching. And then the other side is I'm a career coach, and I do that through Grad School Roadmap for grad school and Career Roadmap for career coaching. So you can see the websites there if you care to check out more information. And my contact information will be provided at the end of this webinar if you'd be interested in speaking with me further about application coaching. I do a free 30-minute phone call for anyone who's interested in that to talk about their circumstances and then my coaching and how I can potentially help. So I would look forward to hearing from you if you'd be interested in doing that. So, all right, got the little housekeeping stuff out of the way. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. This is, again, all about the essays. We'll talk about the critical importance of those essays, some of the things that you might experience with these essays, and what you probably will experience rather than what you might experience as far as what they might look like, what kinds of prompts, that sort of thing. And then we'll talk about the best practices for doing them successfully. We'll talk through 4 specific, very common essay prompts and sort of how you might best address those prompts. And then finally, I'm going to give you a 10-point a playbook, basically, if you will, for preparing your essays. And because I think it's been my experience as an application coach that many times people kind of say, when it comes down to they get to the essays, they say, Kevin, I don't know where to start. I don't know how I should, even start to go about doing this. Well, I'm going to give you an actual playbook so you can actually go step by step through the entire process and hopefully come out of it unscathed and in great shape to get admitted to all your programs. So here we go. Let's start off. So critical importance of essays. The other parts of an application that we talked about last Wednesday night, a lot of those things are basically, it's ink on paper, so to speak. Your transcript from any past academic work that you've done. I mean, it's a document. your standardized test result. It's just that your resume or your CV, again, yes, that's you and a reflection of you and your personality and your of your past professional experience rather. But it's not really a chance to display kind of more of who you are. So the essay or essays that you would have to do as part of your application this is where you sort of come off the paper, so to speak. You and your personality and your disposition, and some of that should come through in these essays, and then you're more than just ink on a paper, so to speak, in the rest of the application. And that's one of the reasons why it's really, really important, because this is something that again, your resume is kind of what it is. Your transcripts, they are what they are. Your standardized test, it kind of is what it is. This is something that you have very specific control over, what you communicate and how you communicate it to the admissions committee. So it's something that it's absolutely vital, because yes, it really can make or break your candidacy. Again, take it from someone who has evaluated thousands of candidates. You can be on paper like the greatest candidate in the world. You could have, great grades, wonderful experience, both in the professional world, through your military service, et cetera. And you could have, it just be glowing on paper. And then, your essays can be just, flat, not good, just weak, not a good reflection of you. And it can completely tank your candidacy. And the other thing to note about essays is that from a timing perspective, and we're talking about the application itself, I'm not talking about time preparing for things like the standardized test, but of completing the applications themselves. This is the component that takes up the majority of the time for almost every candidate, and it's because one of the reasons is because it's just that important. So that's the critical importance of essays, and that's why we have a special webinar just tonight, just on essays, because it's just that important. If you think it's not, I would encourage you to rethink that, because this is really, really important. So glad you're here. Glad you're here to listen in on what we've got here. So let me forward here. Okay, so we've gone through the critical importance of essays. Now let's talk about what you'll probably experience with these and what you might experience with these. So what you'll probably experience, this is for a typical graduate application program, or typical graduate program rather. And just to be clear, just to sort of level set, we've talked about this in another the micro webinars, and we've talked about this last Wednesday. The information that I'm going to be imparting as part of this webinar here is going to be general to all graduate applications and admissions processes. There are always going to be exceptions to the rule. I'm sure somewhere out there's some graduate program where you can apply and not have to submit any essays. I can tell you that is very few and far between, and a major exception to the rule. But it's almost always going to be the case that you're going to have essays to do. And so essays are going to be a part of whether you're applying to law school, medical school, MBA, a master's in engineering, whatever it might be, but I'm going to speak sort of in overall sort of general terms. Sometimes there are nuances and stuff like that versus, like, say, a statement of purpose, which is an essay for a PhD program versus an essay for law school. There are some nuances there, but what I'm trying to say here is that what I'm going to talk to about tonight is general across all graduate programs. It's not going to be necessarily specific to any one sort of business school or engineering school or whatever it might be. So that having been said, what you'll probably experience is 1 to 4 essays per application, and typically the word count is going to be somewhere around 200 to 800 words. And they want the challenge is to write short, not to write long. In other words, what we're trying to do is they want to, one of the things that they're trying to evaluate with these application essays is obviously your written communication skills. And part of that is that they want to evaluate your ability to communicate in a written manner in a tight and concise way that still adequately answers the questions or answers the prompts that they provide. So they're almost always, but not always, but almost always going to provide some sort of word count. Sometimes it's a character count. And usually it's, as far as words, it's going to be somewhere 200 to 800 words. They're not, 4,500 word, term papers or something like that. They're usually on the brief side. And there is an overall trend toward these application essays getting shorter. But don't think that makes them easier, by the way, because sometimes when you have less space to write, it actually makes it more challenging. You'll almost always you'll get prompts that say, hey, these are they'll tell you exactly what they want you to address each question along the way. And there may be an optional essay at the end that basically will say something along the lines of, is there anything else that you wish to communicate to the program or to the admissions committee that hasn't come up in the rest of your application? And maybe there is something, maybe there isn't something, but that is something what you will probably experience. Now, what you could experience. Okay, so a number of things here. And this is some of these things are just sort of FYI. Some of these I would predict that some of you who are participating in this webinar will experience or maybe even already have. So for example, short answer essays. I mentioned that the trend is toward shorter essays. Sometimes they're almost like micro essays where, again, 50 to 100 words, where I don't know if you have any, I don't need, if you could fairly call that an essay. It's like a short answer thing or almost a fill in the blank. And in fact, that is another trend as well, where they actually provide, it's literally a sentence and you have to fill in the blank because they want very specific information. And that definitely not a test of your writing skills when you fill in the blank, but it is a chance to communicate key information to the admissions committee that they are asking for. Open-ended prompts. It's a prompt, but it's very, very vague. Where it's, hey, is it, what more do you want us to know? It's very simple. In fact, this right here, as we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy, is almost verbatim from one of the top MBA programs in the world. This is the essay prompt. And so, this is, sometimes they're very, it's kind of, they leave it to you to determine what else you need to communicate to them. And one of the things that they're measuring when they do that is your judgment around what else they need to know relative to your candidacy. Also, sometimes you might not get a prompt at all. It's just like, hey, here's your admissions essay, 1,000 words, and it's almost like it's an open field in the application, and once again, you have to determine what you're going to write about and what you're not going to write about. Okay, so that's what you could experience. By the way, also, so just almost as like as a humorous aside, some of these programs are getting creative relative to what they're asking for. So, sometimes you might get kind of a little bit of an off the wall application essay prompt. Picture yourself at graduation, and sort of look back at, how it all went, and tell us, 25 random things about yourself. Just give us a list of 25 random things about yourself. Doesn't necessarily have to be about your graduate school aspirations or why you want to go to this program. Just 25 random things about yourself. Here's another trend, by the way, is a video essay where it's usually they give you an option because some people for various reasons may not be comfortable with that. But video essays is definitely a trend when it comes to grad school. And, usually it's a brief, minute, 90 seconds, something along those lines where you have to introduce yourself to the admissions committee. So that's a thing. Here's another one. Describe yourself to the admissions committee and your future classmates using 6 images and corresponding captions. So 6 pictures and corresponding captions. So you have to pick 6 photos, and that's how you introduce yourself to them. And by the way, each one of these essay prompts is actually currently right now somewhere out there in graduate school land, prompts that are actually being used right now. I didn't just make these up. These are actual prompts. Now, again, the chances of you encountering one of these things are overall kind of slim, but you might. So in other words, it's not always, why do you want, to go to law school, or why do you need an MBA? It's not always that straightforward. Sometimes you might get something a little wacky. So just something to be aware of as you continue to kind of go through this process. Okay, so that's what you probably will experience with essays and a little taste of what you might experience. Let's talk about best practices for writing successful essays now. One of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you is this first one. It's talking about be yourself. And this is good advice also for the admissions interview, by the way. But so many times graduate school applicants, for whatever reason, when it comes to the admissions essays, feel as though, or they get this idea in their minds that they have to sort of take on this personality or this caricature or this persona that they think the admissions committee wants, or is really looking for, or the ideal candidate would be like this. The ideal candidate would be like yourself. Just be yourself. Be the best version of your professional self. Don't try to be someone that you're not. Doing that is like one of the 7 deadly sins when it comes to application essays. Be yourself and let some of your personality come through, which is related to the second point here, is that the committee needs to hear your unique voice. You need to be authentic, have self-awareness, genuineness, and your personality should come through in these application essays. If you were to write this and then show your application essay or essays to someone who knows you well, they should be able to, after they read it, one of the things that they should sort of come away with that thinking or saying to you is, yes, this sounds like you. This comes across as you. That is a great way to sort of measure this. Again, your personality should be apparent in your application essays for sure. Another best practice is to write about your achievements and positive qualities. But you have to strike a balance here. A manner that's confident, humble, and professional. It is part, I mean, if for those of you, and probably everyone on the call has applied to some sort of professional job somewhere along the way, or an internship or something along those lines, you know that as part of a job application and as part of a job interview, it is your responsibility to effectively talk about your achievements, talk about your accomplishments, because you're effectively selling yourself to that organization or to that company as part of the job search process. Very similar thing in graduate school admissions. You are basically presenting yourself to the admissions committee, and it's part of your responsibility through your application, through the essays, through the interview, to effectively sell yourself and to communicate your accomplishments and your achievements to the decision makers at those schools. And so it is important that you get comfortable doing that. I know that for many of us, that's not something that we normally do on an everyday basis. And it's something that in some cases it can be downright uncomfortable. But this is a setting where, in fact, that is appropriate. At the same time, we have to strike a balance and do this in a way that is humble as well and professional. So there's a very fine line there. And that's one of the reasons why two things. One is that I would encourage you, if nothing else, share your application essays with someone else and get their feedback on this whole thing. And two, potentially work with someone like myself or another application coach, whoever you might want to work with, who has experience seeing these application essays and can really kind of help you sort of diagnose where you are on that spectrum, so that again, you are appropriately selling yourself and your achievements and your accomplishments, but you're not being too over the top with it. You're not going too far, because that can also work against you as well. So make sure you strike that balance. Okay, the fourth point for best practice for essays. Remember that a story well told is memorable. Okay. And so, just because an essay prompt, if it doesn't necessarily ask you to, tell a story, that doesn't mean that you can't weave one in there. So for example, if you get an application essay that talks about, this is a very common application question in the essays. Hey, it's basically, why do you want to come to this program? Why do you want to come to this school? And that sort of thing. Yeah, you can talk about their program and the curriculum and the alums and this and that. And the other. I mean, there are a lot of different things you can say, and none of that is wrong. But if, say, for example, you attended some sort of admissions event, a coffee chat or something on campus, or a meeting with an alum or something like this, you can actually effectively sort of tell that briefly, kind of provide that narrative, a small vignette within the essay, and say, when I sat down for coffee with, Mike Smith, a recent alum or whatever like that, and then kind of tell like a mini story. And when whatever Mike Smith related to you, say, as soon as he told me about your program, I knew that this was going to be my top choice program, or it was going to be on my short list or whatever like that. Just kind of a story well told is memorable. So if you have any stories that you can kind of weave within there, that can make for a standout essay. Okay, number 5 and 6, make sure you answer the question. So yeah, it may seem strange to have to mention this, but this is actually a thing. You might be surprised at how many people in their application essays don't actually effectively answer the question. Really, really care, make sure that what happens here is generally this: in the process of writing the essay, we start off by, okay, here are my responses to this specific question. And through the editing process, and let's bring in this, and I'm going to have this person edit it, and then we move this around, stuff like that. Suddenly, we aren't answering the question as effectively as we were when we actually started off with the process. So it's nothing, usually it's nothing intentional, but it's just sometimes we do get off track inadvertently. Another reason why it's always good to have someone else have a look at your essays and make sure that they are actually answering the question that was asked. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. If there is an optional essay, I would recommend, generally speaking, taking advantage of it. Again, usually that prompt is something along the lines of, is there anything else that you need to communicate or want to communicate to the admissions committee? If nothing else, you can simply thank them for their time and, say you look forward to hopefully hearing from them, to interview or with a decision or whatever the appropriate thing is for that specific program. But also, this is a great opportunity. If there is something about your candidacy that you do want to communicate to them, this is a great place to do it. It actually shows self-awareness that if there is something that's, especially if there's something that relative to your overall case and your candidacy that's a little lower than what that program typically sees, this is a great place to kind of address that. And my best advice on the optional essay is, and usually the word counts are fairly brief anyway, but keep it brief. Get in and get out. Don't go on and on. Don't make excuses. If there's an issue, own it and get out. Acknowledge it, own it, show confidence, and get get out of there. Shorter is better when it comes to the optional essay. Okay, those are some best practices for writing successful essays. I hope you haven't forgotten what Tanya said about the Q&A. We are going to leave some time at the end, hopefully, to answer questions that you may have, especially relative to application essays. Looking forward to seeing your questions. So please make sure you're using the Q&A box here in Zoom, and we'll get to those after we finish these next two discussion points. We're going to talk about some common essay prompts and then go over that playbook for preparing your essays. So let's keep moving here. I'm going to go over 4 common essay prompts and kind of ways to successfully to address the questions and how to not successfully and things to avoid, I guess is a better way to say that. So very common question here. Why do you want to earn this degree? Why do you want an MBA? Why do you want a master's degree in nursing? Why do you want, or whatever it is, why do you want this, and why now? Why is the timing now? I always encourage the people that I coach on applications to be always thinking about sort of the question behind the question. So, I ask you, okay, so why would they ask this question? It's okay, well, this particular one is they want to know that you've thought out sort of your next steps in your career and that you know exactly how this particular kind of graduate degree will allow you to transition to whatever you are looking to do next in your career. And also the whole thing of why now. From a timing perspective, why now is the time for you to do that? In other words, if you take the cumulative set of experiences that you have so far and you add this graduate degree to it, you are highly likely to have, to be able to have this kind of career outcome immediately upon graduation. That whole narrative needs to make sense. And this question is getting into that. So to successfully address it, you need to know how this degree is going to benefit you. And you need to know, again, that you need to be able to demonstrate that, again, your experience plus this graduate program will allow you to attain your goals and specifically your career goals. That's what they're trying to ascertain here. That you want to avoid is coming across as passive, wishy-washy, not convinced that you've thought this through, and that you don't have that motivation and persistent drive, and the ability to take on this degree now. And also, again, it's that whole sense, have you done your research? Do you know what this kind of degree and this kind of program and this specific school, can potentially do for your career? I would tell you that as a former admissions director and as a coach now, if you don't know these things, I would encourage you to, call time out and, get back to the whole thing of, first of all, is grad school, a good move for your career at all? That was if you may be aware, that was the very first micro webinar that we did as part of this series for SAC. And if you haven't seen that, you might go back and have a look at it if you aren't very sure and haven't done all your research around knowing what the degree can do for you in your career, because it could be the case that you don't need to do this degree. It could be the case that there could be a better pathway for you, a more direct pathway for you. So, Okay, a second common essay prompt. Why do you want to attend this program? Very, it's, and it could be, worded slightly differently. Why are you applying here? What is it that you feel that makes our program stand out? Okay, what's the question behind the question? The question behind the question is they want to know how well you know their program. They want to know that you have not just, that you've done thorough research and that you have a full awareness of their program and how it differentiates itself among others in its peer group. And they want to know that, you applying to their program isn't the first time, when you go to start an application, that's not the first time you actually visited their website, and that you are familiar with the features of their program and what it can do for you. So again, to successfully address this question, make sure that you demonstrate that you have thoroughly researched that school. Did you just again, speaking as a former admissions director, I can read an essay and tell you if a person basically, when they got this question, they cruised around the website for 10 or 15 minutes and then they fired off an essay, and that's that. What did you do besides just look at our website? And it's not only that, can you offer specifics about our program, not just your beautiful campus or your wonderful facilities or your world-renowned faculty? What specifically can you tell me about our program that specifically appeals to you? And is there a sense of genuine enthusiasm that comes through? You can sense that in the writing. And again, it's part of that whole thing about your personality coming through in these essays. Make sure that you are conveying genuine enthusiasm for what that program offers. On the converse, what you want to avoid, a lack of specifics. Again, speaking in generalities is not the way to answer this question. You want as many specifics as you possibly can. And that's when I would, how many times did myself or my colleagues, not just at WashU, but other business schools, we would talk about this all the time. You get the essay that is this, that is the response to this particular prompt. And you could, it's not customized at all. It's totally generic. It is not unique to that specific program. Someone could have taken their response to this kind of question and directly copied and pasted it into the essay of another program. And it would have been totally fine because it was so vague and it was so generic in nature. In a word, the way you answer this question is specifics. Provide specifics about that exact program. That's how you address that one. Okay, the third common essay prompt, short-term, long-term career goals, and how would this program help you attain them? This is very straightforward. Again, this is related to that first prompt. They want to know that, again, you have a thorough and well thought through sense of how their program is going to help you attain your career goals, both short-term and long-term. And so just make sure that you first of all, that you can articulate your short and long-term career goals. Once again, if you can't, I would suggest you pause the whole thing and figure out, again, do you really need a graduate program? Do you really need this degree to, attain whatever it is, this career goal that you're talking about doing? And by the way, it is okay if you're not 100% absolutely without fail bulletproof. Sure, that is okay. But you need to you still have to answer the question. You can offer, generally speaking, say, well, I'm considering either kind of option A or option B. And then when I would get into your program, I would do, some exploration, and you can actually specifically say how you plan to explore and make a determination among those two options. That would be fine, generally speaking. But you do want to make sure that you come across as someone who is very career driven and has thought through and knows exactly how this program, this kind of degree, will get you to, to get you to where you want to go. And again, the more specifics you can provide in providing your response to this essay, the better. The thing to avoid on this is unrealistic or non-specific goals. It is not to your advantage to, if you have some career goal that it has nothing to do with this specific sort of program. It all needs the whole narrative needs to sort of make sense. And if you are vague in your career goals, non-specific, the admissions committee will see that from a mile away, and it's not good. You need to have thought this through and to be able to provide some specifics when it comes to these sorts of things, which again is another reason to talk to people in your network, talk to people who you trust, talk to a coach, to make sure that, at the whole beginning of this process, that you know what your career goals are. And then also correspondingly, how your graduate program that you're targeting will help you attain that goal. extremely important. Okay, finally, the last sort of common essay prompt. This is describe a significant achievement you've attained. Why was this meaningful for you, and what did you learn about yourself? This is an example of what we'll talk about a little bit more in a couple of weeks when it comes to interviewing. We talk about behavioral questions, behavioral interview questions. It's the same thing, and you could get a behavioral question such as this one as part of your grad school application as one of the essays, where they ask you to provide an example. Tell me about a time when. Can you provide an example of whatever? Describe a significant achievement you've attained. Pretty straightforward. There's one of this specific one, again, question behind the question is like a significant achievement you've attained. They're going to assume that you're going to write about something that is one of your most prominent, most important achievements, something that you're proudest of. And one of the questions they want to know is what exactly would that be? And so you want to make sure that, therefore, to successfully address the question, and it's something that's relevant to the kind of degree that you're applying for. So I know a lot of people are looking at MBAs, and that's great. MBAs being a degree where we're training future business leaders. It could be the case that your business experience isn't all that deep. That's totally fine for the MBA. But we're talking about leadership. And so I would expect that everyone who comes through one of the service academies has a profound amount of experience one way or another, and could speak to achievement relative to their leadership. And so make sure, again, that topic that is centric of your response here is very well related to the kind of degree. You want to err on, if it's something that's a little older versus something that's a little more recent, err on the side of the thing that's a little more recent. Try not to go too far back in time on this one. And that's, it's this whole, the question behind the question. They're going to want to know, okay, what is a significant achievement to this applicant? And if you write about how you won the 8th grade science fair, that might be a significant achievement, but it's probably a long time ago, and they're going to say, really, this is this woman's most a significant achievement in their book. They're going to be wondering perhaps what you've been doing since the 8th grade science fair. So just make sure that it's something a little more recent, and again, relevant to the kind of degree that you're applying for. And when it comes to this, if by chance this particular prompt, and sort of broadly overall, if you were part of a team, part of a group, part of your squad, if it's a collection of individuals who all contributed toward this achievement, it is appropriate, of course, to acknowledge others' achievements and their contributions. But this is, again, one of those instances where, yes, you can acknowledge the team's effort, but they want to know what your contribution was. How did you help lead to this successful outcome? And so the emphasis needs to be strongly on you and on your contributions to this significant achievement in this particular case. And then things to avoid in answering this question, and all behavioral questions, actually. This is a very common pitfall in these questions that are behavioral questions. When you speak in terms that are only general and you don't provide a specific example. So for example, with the way to not answer a question that says, describe a significant achievement you've attained, the way to not do that is to speak in sort of general terms that, I've had many achievements. I've been fortunate to have many achievements and many accomplishments in my career. And I think, generally speaking, I attribute most of that to my hard work and my dedication and my focus on teamwork and that sort of thing. And what I generally learn from this sort of thing is humility. Is that all may be true, but what they're asking for here is describe a significant. They want a specific example. Okay, they don't want to hear your commentary in general about significant achievements. They want a specific example. And so make absolutely sure that you do that. We're not asking for something general here. We want specific. And so that's what you want to avoid in this kind of essay prompt. Okay, coming on around the home stretch here, the playbook for preparing your essays, and then we'll get to the Q&A. I hope that those are the questions are rolling in, and I'm looking forward to seeing your questions. So let's talk about a playbook for preparing essays. Okay, this is gonna be a step-by-step thing. There's 10 points here. And again, I get at this a lot. Kevin, I don't know how to start, or where do I begin with this whole thing? Okay, well, here's a one approach that you could take. It's not the only approach, but here's one approach that you could take. Start by, once you get to the essays, I hope at that point the schools or the programs where you're going to be applying. So this is my suggestion. Start by getting all your essay prompts into one place. and just, start seeing them all in one place and let your unconscious mind start to sort of marinate on that and start to think about various responses. The other advantage of getting them all in one place is that you can kind of, right in front of you, instead of having these essays over here and this, these over here and that, when you have them all here, you should see all the more that a lot of them are probably going to have some common ground. And so, yes, it is the case that you should definitely be customizing every one of your essays for every one of your programs that you're applying for, without question. But it's sure, we understand you can pick up various parts of one essay and move it to here and that sort of thing. Totally understood. People do all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. Just when you do that as part of the editing process, you have to be very sure that you are sending the right information and providing the right information to the right place. And again, getting back to the earlier point, and that is that through that editing process, you are still effectively answering specifically the question that is asked for each program. So you got to do that. But anyway, get all your essay prompts in one spot, and then decide the order that you'll complete them. That will probably be relative to any application deadlines that you may have for these various different programs, or it could be relative as well to which programs are your top choices and which ones you want to get that application in sooner rather than later. In some admissions worlds, they usually don't have deadlines. They just have one big sort of rolling application cycle, in which case, again, that could influence which ones you do first, because it's which application you want to finish and submit first. Again, a strategic decision to make as part of the application process, and allowing yourself plenty of time. Again, this is the part of the application itself that typically takes people the longest amount of time, and rushed work is usually not our best. And so allow yourself plenty of time for this. Maybe even make a whole schedule and just, give yourself deadlines and sort of back out a schedule for completing these essays off of that. The third step, this sort of playbook, get your ideas down on paper, however you best write. It may be a while since you've written essays, but consider that. Are you an outline person? Are you a brainstorm person? Are you just write it all out and type it all out? Are you a handwritten person? Are you a type? I mean, whatever that is, where do you best sort of get ideas and just let it flow? Is it at your office? Is it right before you go to bed at night? Is it on your back porch? I mean, is it at the beach? I mean, everyone's got their formula for kind of how they do this, but just get things out on paper, however you best do that. Then is the fourth point, then start formulating, then start pulling things together, a lot of copy and pasting work, maybe some rewriting, some transition sentences, whatever. But, get ideas fleshed out, write full sentences, full paragraphs, reorder things, that sort of thing. And so you're continuing your progress and get it to the point where you've got actually a rough draft. Then leave it alone for a day or 3 or 2 or whatever it might be, depending on your overall timeline. Then come back to it and revisit it. Is everything you wanted? First of all, did you answer the question and come back to it? Does it make sense? Something that you thought was really well phrased and maybe even appropriately humorous or whatever. When you first drafted it, you might come back to it 3 days later and think, oh, I nailed it. Or no, I need to rework that. It actually isn't all that great. And just, again, leave it alone for a little while and then come back to it and look at it with if you will, a fresh set of eyes. Share a draft with 1 or 2 people who get candid feedback. I've been saying this, I think, this entire live webinar, so I'm not going to beat it up too much more than I already have, but get their overall thoughts and also ask them to proofread it. In a really good way to make sure that you have actually answered the question is to don't give them the prompt. Don't tell them what the prompt from the school was, and then ask them what they think it was. If they're in the ballpark, if they're reasonably close, then you've probably done an adequate job of answering the question. If they don't, you might need to rethink that. And then finally, again, this thing I mentioned earlier, this whole thing about being yourself and being genuine. This is why it's important to show your essays to someone who knows you pretty well. Hey, do you and your personality come through in this? Does it sound like you? And that's, again, one of the dangers of, if I don't encourage sharing drafts with, 5 people or 10 people, or even 4 is even, you're starting to push it too much, because the problem is that the work, the essay itself, the language in it can start to get kind of all homogenized, and well-intentioned individuals are making suggestions and edits and this sort of thing. And then as you pull all those things in and introduce them into the narrative, you can start to lose your voice in the whole thing. And that is not what you want. So yes, show it to others, but 1 or 2. And after that, I would not show it to, because well-intentioned people can actually do you more harm than good when it comes to this. So after you do that, make any last revisions, double check that you're within the required word or character count. This is a great way to stand out in in a negative way. We talked about this in one of the micro webinars. If they say 500 words, that doesn't mean 550, doesn't mean 525. Make sure that you're staying within those character counts as well. When an admissions committee member is reading, dozens of essays in a day or in a week or whatever it might be, they will tend to notice that one that seems to go longer. It will stick out, and that's not how you again, follow directions. Make sure you're staying within those recommended character or word counts. Give it one final thorough proof. Upload it and submit that thing, or those essays as it might be. Just be careful again that in the editing process, and when you go to upload that essay, whether you've got a Word document on your computer and you go to upload it into their application itself, or maybe you have to copy and paste it into a field or whatever it might be very, very sure that your perfect essay for school A, actually you're putting it into the application for school B, and that because it's been a long day or a long week, you don't inadvertently, you're on school A application and you accidentally grab school B's essay, which is a perfect essay for school B. So make sure that you might be surprised at how often that would happen. You talk to admissions officers and or former admissions officers like myself, we can all tell you all kinds of stories about getting essays that are really well done, but weren't for my institution, for a different program. So again, this is a mistake that you want to avoid. Just be careful. Again, I mentioned this at the top of this, talking about the playbook for preparing your essays. This is not the only way to do it, but this is one way. These 10 steps is one way to potentially sort of do the whole thing. If you have your own process, if you have your own preferred way of doing it, and if you're confident that that's the best thing that works for you, my gosh, go for it. You do it your way. This is just one way that I've seen be successful for a lot of applicants. So. Okay, we're just about to get to the Q&A here, but again, we've gone through a lot of things today relative to the essays because again, they're just that important. As we talked about what you probably will experience and what you might experience, some best practices and some do's and don'ts when it comes to common essay prompts. And then of course, we just talked about the playbook for actually preparing those essays. One final thought before we get to the Q&A here, and that is that just keep in mind that anything that you write about in your essays could get asked about in the admissions interview. It's every program does their admissions interviews in their own way. Sometimes it'll be the case that your interviewer will have only your resume or CV in front of them as part of the interview process. This is commonly known as a blind interview, but it could be more than that. Your interviewer could have thoroughly read your entire application, including your essays, and as part of the admissions interview may have a follow-up question or two for you. So this shouldn't necessarily be a good thing or a bad thing. All I'm saying is that just as part of your interview preparation and as part of what you're thinking about as far as what you will address in your essays, just know that it could come up again and you may be asked to speak to specific parts of your application essays in the application interview, which is a very lovely segue to not this coming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, the 29th. I'm going to be talking about how to ace the admissions interview, another part of the application that can make or break your candidacy is the admissions interview. It's worth saying now, I'll probably say it again on the 29th, how many times as an admissions director did I have a situation where someone, their application on paper, including the essays, were just wonderful. We brought them in for an interview and basically they had everything they had every reason that they were probably going to get admitted. They just didn't need to screw it up. And they came in and had a horrible interview and they were denied admission. On the other hand, people who were borderline candidates who, on paper were not strong for the program, but for whatever reason, we decided to go ahead and interview them anyway, came in and just had a wonderful interview and earned, admission and in some cases scholarships. The admissions interview, just like the essays, are extremely important. We're going to go in much more depth on those on the 29th. Next Wednesday, adding value to your career with graduate certificates. will be the topic then. Graduate certificates, definitely a good potential alternative to a full graduate degree. And much more will be said about that on September the 22nd, next Wednesday evening. And again, I hope that you can join us, not just for those, but also for the October 6th live webinar, which will lead into the live admissions event that evening, again, October the 6th. My contact information is on the slide there, as well as my LinkedIn information. I'm big on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy if you wanted to reach out to me there and or send me an email. Again, if you're interested in application coaching, do a free 30-minute call with anyone who's interested on that. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Tanya to talk or to look at any questions that may have come in. Tanya, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to questions.
Thank you, Kevin. It was really great information. We do have a question. Katie's asking, what was a standout application you reviewed and why was it so memorable?
Standout application, I remember one of the most memorable applications I haven't talked about it in a while, but it's we had a gentleman when I was at WashU who he was a West Point grad, and he was when he was deployed, he was wounded in combat, and he talked about in one of his application essays, he talked about the leadership that he had instilled in his squad and in the men and women that he was around, and the leadership that he displayed before that incident took place, and how when it took place, it quite literally saved his life, because they all knew exactly what to do. And it was the most amazing essay I've ever read. It was just awesome. And it was not just on so many levels, but again, because it was, in this case, it was an MBA application talking about leadership, and really talked about him and his leadership, and in a profound way, and at the most critical of moments. That was awesome. And in addition to that essay, he had a phenomenal interview. I remember that as well. And again, he outlined it perfectly throughout that entire application, with the other essays, recommendations, everything aligned perfectly with what he wanted to do. Again, that narrative, that whole, again, here's my experience up until now, here's what I know your program has to offer, and here are my career goals, and here's how that whole narrative, that whole chain makes sense and is cohesive and is attainable. And yeah, we admitted him. He's in his career, he's off and running right now. He's doing really well. And again, the thing is that all in all, above everything else, it was genuine. It was authentic. I remember when I actually met him for the first time on campus, having reviewed his application. Yeah, you meet someone for the first time, and you're getting to know, but you could tell that, yeah, the guy who wrote this and this guy, you can see how it all was one cohesive thing. So he was genuine, he was authentic. He wrote just a dynamite essay that really went into his effective leadership, and it was all cohesive relative to his experience, our program, and his career goals. He absolutely nailed it. That was an awesome application. Appreciate that question.
Well, apparently you were so thorough, Kevin, in your
really?
presentation.
Okay.
So we don't have any other questions unless somebody has a parting question.
Yeah.
That
well, I'll leave with one other thing, and I appreciate the question about the best application ever. I'm not going to share. I'm saying that up front. I'm not going to share the topics, but among admissions officers, when at these various admissions events and stuff like that, there's a very friendly sort of rivalry among all of us. And you after an admissions event, you'd go to dinner, or go get a couple of drinks or whatever like that. You talk about talk about some things, and there are all kinds of stories out there about essay topics that people chose to write about that show extraordinarily poor judgment. And if you were to hang up those essays on a bulletin board, you could call it your wall of shame, basically. And that, again, it's not, it's just one of those things. And correspondingly, there could be a whole wall of outstanding great ones too. Don't get me wrong. But again, one of the key things in this whole process is your strategy around what you will write about and what you won't write about, because just that decision by itself is super important. I mean, because again, a really strong topic can lay the foundation for an outstanding essay, whereas a kind of a lukewarm one can set you up for a lack of success. So again, as part of this whole strategy, part of this whole process, make sure that you have well thought through exactly what you're going to address and what you're going to kind of leave alone. Because for most individuals at this level, there are probably a lot of different things you could write about. Make good, strong, strategic decisions about what you're going to share and not share with the admissions committee.
Sounds great. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Kevin,
Yeah.
for the great presentation. Thank you to all of the folks who attended this evening.
My pleasure.
Again, we'll have, I'll put my contact information in the chat real quick. I forgot to do that. I apologize. But we'll have this session recording available to you in the next few days. And again, if you have any questions or need assistance, feel free to reach out to any of us.
Great. Thank you all so much. I enjoyed it. We'll see you again soon.